The psychology of obsession. Have you ever wondered why some people naturally command attention wherever they go, while others struggle to keep someone interested? Why is it that certain individuals leave such a powerful impression that people can't stop thinking about them, even long after the interaction has ended? It's not always about physical appearance. It's not always about money. And it's definitely not about trying too hard. In fact, the truth is often the complete opposite. Some of the most captivating people in the world understand a psychological principle that was discussed centuries ago by the famous political thinker Machiavelli. Machiavelli studied human behavior deeply. His writings weren't just about politics or power. They were about understanding the hidden motivations that drive people. One of the most powerful insights from his philosophy is this: people rarely become obsessed with what is easily available. Instead, obsession is created by mystery, emotional stimulation, and perceived value. Think about it for a moment. When something is always accessible, predictable, and constantly present, our minds quickly become used to it. It becomes ordinary. But when something is rare, uncertain, or slightly out of reach, the brain reacts differently. It begins to wonder, it begins to chase, it begins to imagine, and imagination is the birthplace of obsession. The human mind and desire. Human psychology is deeply wired to pursue what it cannot easily obtain. This concept appears everywhere in life. Luxury brands become desirable not because they are available everywhere, but because they are scarce. Exclusive clubs attract attention because not everyone can enter. Rare art becomes priceless because it exists in limited quantities. The same principle applies to human attraction. When someone appears too eager, too predictable, or too available, the mind subconsciously places them in the category of already obtained. And what is already obtained rarely stimulates excitement. But when someone carries a sense of mystery, confidence, and independence, they activate curiosity. Curiosity turns into interest, interest turns into fascination, and fascination over time can become obsession. The power of mystery. One of the most powerful psychological triggers in attraction is mystery. Mystery activates the imagination. When people cannot fully understand you, their minds begin filling in the gaps. They start asking themselves questions. Who is this person really? What are they thinking? Why do they seem so calm and composed? And once the mind begins asking questions, it becomes invested in finding answers. This is why some individuals naturally attract attention without even trying. They reveal just enough about themselves to spark interest, but never everything. They allow people to discover them slowly. And that slow discovery creates emotional engagement. Think about movies for a moment. The most interesting characters are rarely the ones whose entire story is revealed immediately. Instead, the most captivating characters are those who remain slightly mysterious. You want to understand them. You want to learn more about them. And because of that, they stay in your mind. The same psychological dynamic happens in real life. Why being too available kills attraction. In modern society, many people unknowingly destroy their own value by being too available. They reply instantly to every message. They constantly seek validation. They make themselves completely accessible at all times. At first, this may seem like kindness or interest, but psychologically, it often communicates something else. It communicates that the person has no scarcity, and when there is no scarcity, the brain perceives less value. Imagine walking into a store where every item is free. At first, you might feel excited, but after a few minutes, the excitement disappears. Why? Because value is closely connected to effort and rarity. The same principle applies to relationships and attraction. When someone's attention is given too easily, it becomes less meaningful. But when attention is selective, intentional, and controlled, it becomes powerful. Emotional stimulation and memory. Another factor that creates obsession is emotional stimulation. The human brain remembers emotions more strongly than ordinary events. Think about the moments in your life that you remember most vividly. They are usually moments filled with strong feelings.
excitement, surprise, anticipation, even uncertainty. When someone consistently creates emotional stimulation during interactions, the brain begins associating that person with excitement, and once that association forms, the mind begins seeking more of it. This is why charismatic individuals often leave lasting impressions. They don't simply exist in conversations, they create experiences. They make people feel something, and feelings are what the mind remembers. The importance of independence. One of the most attractive qualities a person can possess is independence. Independence signals confidence. It shows that a person has a life, goals, and purpose outside of seeking validation from others. When someone appears completely centered around another person, it can unintentionally create pressure. But when someone has their own ambitions, passions, and direction, they become naturally intriguing. This is because humans are drawn to individuals who are moving towards something meaningful. Purpose creates presence, and presence creates attraction. People who are deeply focused on their goals often appear calm, confident, and emotionally balanced. These qualities naturally draw attention, not because they are trying to impress others, but because they are fully engaged with their own path. The beginning of fascination. Attraction often begins with simple curiosity. A brief interaction, a brief conversation, a moment of unexpected connection. But curiosity alone does not create obsession. For fascination to grow, the mind must remain engaged. There must be enough intrigue, emotional energy, and uncertainty to keep the imagination active. This is where many people make a mistake. They try to reveal everything about themselves immediately. They try to prove their worth too quickly. But the truth is that fascination grows gradually. It grows through discovery. It grows through moments. It grows through experiences. And the slower that discovery happens, the more powerful it becomes. The hidden principle. The deeper principle behind all of this is simple but powerful. People do not become obsessed with what they already fully understand. They become obsessed with what they want to understand. Mystery invites exploration. Exploration creates emotional investment, and emotional investment creates attachment. This psychological chain reaction has been observed throughout history, from relationships to politics to power. The thinkers who studied human nature, including Machiavelli, understood that human desire often grows strongest when it is stimulated but not completely satisfied, not because of manipulation, but because of the natural way the human mind works. Understanding these psychological patterns gives us insight into how attraction, fascination, and obsession truly develop. It reveals that true magnetism is not about trying harder, it is about understanding.
The principle of scarcity. People rarely become obsessed with what is easily available. Instead, fascination grows when something feels rare, valuable, and slightly out of reach. This leads us to one of the most powerful psychological principles ever observed in human behavior, the principle of scarcity. This idea was deeply understood by thinkers like Niccolò, who believed that power often comes not from what you give people, but from what you withhold. Scarcity is the silent force that shapes desire. It influences what we want. It determines what we chase, and it decides what we value. Why scarcity creates desire? Human beings are naturally wired to pursue what feels limited. When something appears abundant, the brain assumes it will always be there. But when something feels rare or limited, the brain immediately assigns it higher value. Think about the psychology behind limited offers. When a product says, only 5 left in stock, people suddenly feel a sense of urgency, even if they weren't planning to buy it before. Nothing about the product changed, but the perception of scarcity changed everything. The same thing happens in social interactions and attraction. When someone's time, attention, and presence are constantly available, people subconsciously assume they will always be there. But when someone's presence becomes selective and intentional, it creates curiosity. It raises questions, and those questions create fascination. The danger of overexposure. One of the fastest ways to lose intrigue is through overexposure. In today's digital world, people often reveal every detail about themselves online. Every thought, every feeling, every moment. At first glance, this may seem like authenticity, but psychologically, constant exposure removes mystery. It leaves nothing for the imagination to explore. Imagine reading a book where the entire story is explained on the first page. There would be no reason to continue reading. The excitement of discovery would disappear. The same principle applies to people. When someone slowly reveals themselves over time, they create a journey of discovery. And the human mind loves discovery. It activates curiosity. It activates anticipation. And anticipation is one of the strongest emotional drivers in human behavior. The power of controlled attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess.
Where you place your attention communicates what you value. But more importantly, how often you give your attention determines how valuable it appears. When attention is given constantly and without boundaries, it becomes ordinary. But when attention is given selectively, it becomes meaningful. Think about the difference between someone who responds instantly every single time and someone who occasionally takes time because they are busy living their life. The second person communicates something powerful without saying a single word. They communicate that their time is valuable, that they have priorities, that their life does not revolve around constant validation. This naturally increases perceived value because people are drawn to individuals who appear to have purpose and direction. Scarcity and respect. Scarcity is not about playing games. It is about respecting your own time, energy, and attention. When people respect their own boundaries, others begin to respect them as well. But when someone constantly sacrifices their time and attention for approval, it can unintentionally signal low self-worth. Confidence often reveals itself through boundaries. When someone calmly protects their time and energy, it demonstrates emotional strength, and emotional strength is attractive. This is why individuals who focus on their goals and personal growth often attract attention naturally. They are not chasing validation, they are pursuing purpose, and purpose creates a quiet form of magnetism. The psychological loop of desire. Scarcity also creates what psychologists call a desire loop. When something becomes temporarily unavailable, the mind begins thinking about it more. Questions start forming. Why aren't they responding yet? What are they doing? Why do they seem so calm and independent? These thoughts keep the mind engaged, and engagement gradually transforms into fascination. This does not happen when someone is constantly available, because constant availability leaves no room for curiosity. The mind simply moves on to something more stimulating. But when interactions contain moments of absence, the imagination fills the silence, and imagination often amplifies attraction far beyond reality. The illusion of effortless value. Some people appear naturally valuable in social situations. They walk into a room and others notice them immediately. They don't try too hard, they don't speak excessively, and yet their presence feels powerful. Why? Because they understand something subtle about human perception. Value is often communicated through restraint. When someone talks too much, tries too hard, or constantly seeks attention, it signals insecurity. But when someone speaks with intention, moves with confidence, and reveals themselves gradually, it signals composure. This composure creates intrigue, and intrigue leads to fascination. Throughout history, powerful figures have understood this dynamic. Even the philosopher Machiavelli observed that influence often comes from maintaining a certain level of unpredictability. When people cannot fully anticipate your behavior, they pay closer attention, and attention is the gateway to influence. Scarcity in the digital age. Modern technology has made attention incredibly cheap. Messages are instant, responses are expected immediately, people are constantly available. But this environment has also made genuine presence extremely rare. Those who learn to control their attention stand out. They respond thoughtfully instead of instantly. They prioritize meaningful conversations instead of endless communication. They live their lives fully instead of waiting for notifications. Ironically, this behavior creates more intrigue than constant availability ever could, because in a world where everyone is always online, the person who is occasionally unavailable appears more valuable, not because they are ignoring people, but because they are living with purpose. The balance between presence and absence. Scarcity does not mean disappearing completely. It means creating balance, being present when it matters, and allowing space when necessary. Too much absence creates distance, but too much presence removes intrigue. The most captivating individuals understand this balance naturally. They engage fully in conversations, but they also maintain their independence. They make people feel valued, but they never sacrifice their identity to gain approval. This balance creates emotional tension, and emotional tension keeps the mind interested. Why people remember rare experiences. Think about the most memorable moments in your life. They were probably rare, unexpected, unique. Scarcity amplifies emotional impact. A rare experience stays in memory longer because it stands apart from ordinary life. The same applies to human interactions. When someone creates rare, meaningful moments, those moments become unforgettable, and unforgettable moments create lasting impressions. People may forget ordinary conversations, but they rarely forget moments that made them feel something powerful. Scarcity is not about manipulation. It is about understanding the natural psychology of desire. When something is constantly available, the mind becomes indifferent. But when something is rare, meaningful, and intentional, the mind becomes curious, and curiosity is the first step towards fascination. In the next part, we will explore something even more powerful than scarcity, the psychology of emotional triggers, why certain interactions create intense memories, how emotional highs and lows can keep someone thinking about you, and why people often become most attached to the individuals who make them feel the strongest emotions. Because in the end, people rarely remember what you said, but they always remember how you made them feel.
The psychology of emotional triggers. Scarcity alone is not enough to create obsession. There is another powerful force working behind the scenes of human attraction and fascination. That force is emotion. Human beings are not purely logical creatures. We like to believe our decisions are rational, but in reality, most of our choices are influenced by how something makes us feel. This is why certain people leave a lasting impression while others are quickly forgotten. It's not always about what they say. It's about the emotional experience they create. Philosophers and observers of human nature, including Camarade, understood that influence often comes from controlling emotional perception, because once someone becomes emotionally invested, their mind begins to attach meaning to every interaction. The brain remembers emotion, not information. Think about the most memorable conversations you've had in your life. You probably don't remember every word that was spoken, but you remember the feeling. You remember the excitement. You remember the tension. You remember the surprise. Emotion is the glue that binds memory together. The human brain stores emotional experiences much more deeply than ordinary moments. This is why dramatic events, exciting moments, and unexpected interactions stay in our minds for years. When someone consistently creates emotional experiences, their presence becomes psychologically significant. And once someone becomes emotionally significant, the mind naturally returns to thoughts about them.
Emotional variety creates fascination. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships and social interactions is becoming emotionally predictable. When every conversation feels exactly the same, the brain quickly loses interest. Predictability reduces stimulation, and the brain constantly seeks stimulation. But when interactions contain variety, something different happens. There are moments of humor, moments of seriousness, moments of mystery, moments of silence. This emotional variation keeps the brain engaged because the mind begins wondering what will happen next. It becomes curious, and curiosity keeps attention locked in place. The power of uncertainty. One emotional trigger that has a particularly strong psychological effect is uncertainty. When everything about a person is predictable, the brain quickly categorizes them as familiar. Once something becomes familiar, the mind relaxes. But when a person occasionally behaves in unexpected ways while still maintaining emotional stability, it creates intrigue. Uncertainty activates the brain's curiosity center. It encourages deeper attention. And attention gradually turns into fascination. This is why unpredictable storylines in movies are more engaging than predictable ones. The mind becomes invested in discovering what happens next. The same dynamic happens in real life. When someone is slightly unpredictable, but still confident and composed, they remain interesting. People begin to observe them more closely. They begin analyzing their behavior. And slowly, that curiosity grows stronger. The emotional roller coaster effect. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating about emotional attachment. Relationships that contain emotional highs and lows often create stronger memories than relationships that remain emotionally flat. This doesn't mean creating drama or conflict intentionally. But it does mean that contrast in emotional experiences can strengthen memory. For example, imagine two different interactions. In the first interaction, everything is calm, predictable, and routine. In the second interaction, there is laughter, a moment of deep conversation, and perhaps a brief moment of tension followed by resolution. Which interaction is more memorable? Almost always the second one. Because emotional contrast stimulates the brain. The mind remembers experiences that stand out from ordinary life. When someone consistently creates memorable emotional moments, they become associated with excitement and depth. And people naturally gravitate toward experiences that make them feel alive. Emotional investment. Another powerful psychological principle is investment. The more emotionally invested someone becomes, the harder it is for them to detach. Investment can take many forms: time, attention, energy, thought. When someone spends time thinking about another person, their mind begins forming emotional connections. These connections grow stronger with repeated engagement. This is why deep conversations often create stronger bonds than superficial ones. When people talk about ideas, dreams, fears, and ambitions, they reveal parts of themselves that are rarely shared. This vulnerability creates emotional depth. And emotional depth creates meaningful connections. Creating memorable interactions. Memorable interactions rarely happen by accident. They usually involve presence.
genuine attention, and emotional awareness. When someone listens carefully and responds thoughtfully, the other person feels valued. When someone shares stories, humor, and insight, conversations become engaging. But the most memorable interactions often include something unexpected. A surprising perspective, a thoughtful observation, a moment of genuine authenticity. These moments stand out, and the mind remembers what stands out. Emotional curiosity. One of the strongest emotional triggers is curiosity about another person's inner world. When someone seems calm, thoughtful, and slightly mysterious, people naturally become curious about them. What motivates them? What do they truly believe? What experiences shaped them? This curiosity creates a psychological pull, because the human mind loves solving puzzles. When someone appears complex or intriguing, the mind wants to understand them. And that desire to understand keeps them present in thought, even when they are not physically around. The balance between warmth and distance. Another emotional dynamic that influences attraction is the balance between warmth and independence. Warmth makes people feel comfortable and appreciated, but independence creates intrigue. When someone combines both qualities, they create a powerful emotional effect. They are kind and engaging when present, but they also maintain their own direction and identity. This balance prevents emotional dependency while still allowing connection. It creates space for curiosity while maintaining respect. And this balance often leaves a lasting impression. Why people chase emotional intensity. Human beings naturally seek experiences that stimulate strong feelings. Excitement, adventure, passion. In many cases, people become attached not just to a person, but to the emotional experience associated with that person. If someone consistently creates stimulating conversations, meaningful moments, and emotional depth, their presence becomes valuable, because they bring something different from ordinary interactions. And once someone becomes associated with unique emotional experiences, their absence can be felt strongly, which often leads to increased curiosity and attachment. Emotion is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. It shapes memory, it shapes attraction, and it shapes the connections people form with one another. When interactions contain emotional depth, curiosity, and variation, they become unforgettable. But there is one final psychological element that amplifies everything we have discussed so far. A subtle but incredibly powerful force. Mystery.
The power of mystery and silence. Up to this point, we have explored two powerful forces behind fascination. First, scarcity, the idea that people value what is not constantly available. Second, emotional stimulation, the principle that people remember how you make them feel. But there is another force that quietly amplifies both of these elements, a force that has shaped influence, attraction, and power for centuries. That force is mystery. Throughout history, individuals who understood the power of mystery often commanded more attention than those who revealed everything about themselves. Observers of human behavior, including Chateaubriand, recognized that influence often grows when a person remains partially unpredictable and difficult to fully understand, because the human mind is naturally drawn toward what it cannot easily explain. The curiosity instinct. Human beings possess a powerful psychological instinct called curiosity. Curiosity is what drives exploration, it drives learning, and it drives fascination. Whenever the brain encounters something incomplete or mysterious, it begins searching for answers. Questions start forming automatically. Who is this person? What are they thinking? Why do they behave this way? These questions create mental engagement, and mental engagement keeps someone present in the mind long after the interaction ends. Mystery fuels this process. When people reveal themselves gradually, they allow curiosity to grow naturally. But when everything is revealed immediately, curiosity disappears. And when curiosity disappears, fascination fades. Why silence can be powerful? Many people believe influence comes from speaking more, from explaining everything, from constantly expressing thoughts and feelings. But in reality, some of the most influential individuals understand the power of silence. Silence creates space, and in that space, the other person's imagination begins working. When someone pauses before responding, they appear thoughtful.
When someone listens carefully instead of dominating the conversation, they appear confident. Silence can also communicate emotional control, because people who feel the need to fill every moment with words often appear uncertain. But people who are comfortable with silence communicate composure, and composure naturally commands attention. The psychological impact of mystery. Mystery stimulates the imagination, and imagination is far more powerful than reality. When people only know part of your story, their minds begin filling in the rest. Sometimes they imagine qualities that are even more fascinating than the truth. This is why mysterious characters and stories often become the most interesting ones. They leave clues instead of explanations. They reveal fragments instead of full answers. And because of this, audiences become emotionally invested in discovering more. In real life, the same pattern occurs. When someone shares pieces of themselves slowly over time, it creates an unfolding narrative. Each new detail feels like a discovery, and discoveries create excitement. The danger of oversharing. In modern society, oversharing has become extremely common. People often reveal every thought, every emotion, and every experience immediately. While openness can build trust, constant oversharing can remove intrigue. When someone shares everything at once, there is no journey of discovery, and without discovery, curiosity fades quickly. Mystery is not about hiding who you are, it is about revealing yourself in layers. Just like a story that unfolds chapter by chapter, each interaction becomes another page, another clue, another piece of the puzzle, and this gradual revelation keeps people interested. Presence without explanation. Some individuals command attention simply through their presence. They walk into a room and people notice them, not because they are loud, not because they are seeking attention, but because they carry themselves with calm confidence. They do not rush to explain themselves. They do not chase approval. They allow their actions to speak louder than their words. This type of presence naturally creates intrigue. People begin observing them more closely. They start wondering what kind of person they are, and that curiosity slowly grows into fascination. Strategic communication. Mystery is also connected to how someone communicates. Influential communicators rarely say everything at once. They speak with intention. They choose their words carefully, and sometimes they allow others to speak more. This approach has a powerful psychological effect. When someone feels heard and understood, they become more emotionally invested in the conversation. At the same time, the person who listens more often appears wiser and more composed. Because they are not speaking impulsively, they are observing, they are analyzing, and this creates the impression of depth. The role of self-control. Mystery often requires emotional discipline. It means resisting the urge to explain every detail. It means allowing space for curiosity to develop naturally. And it means remaining calm even when others are trying to figure you out. This type of self-control signals strength. It communicates that a person is comfortable with themselves, that they do not need constant validation, and confidence without validation is one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess. When someone appears secure in who they are, people naturally want to understand them better. Why mystery creates long-term fascination? The most powerful aspect of mystery is that it sustains long-term interest. If someone fully understands everything about you within the first few interactions, curiosity disappears. But if new aspects of your personality continue emerging over time, fascination remains alive. Every new discovery renews interest. Every unexpected insight creates excitement. And slowly, the mind begins associating that person with intrigue and depth. This is how fascination can evolve into obsession, not through force, but through continuous curiosity. The psychology of unpredictability. Another powerful element of mystery is unpredictability. Predictable behavior quickly becomes routine, but when someone occasionally behaves in ways that surprise others while still remaining authentic, it captures attention. Unpredictability stimulates the brain. It creates anticipation, because the mind begins wondering what might happen next. This is why dynamic personalities often stand out in social environments. They break patterns, they introduce new ideas, they challenge expectations, and that unpredictability keeps interactions exciting. The quiet magnetism. Some people possess a quiet form of magnetism. They are not the loudest in the room. They are not constantly seeking attention, yet people feel drawn to them. This quiet magnetism often comes from a combination of three qualities: calm confidence, emotional control, and mystery. When these qualities come together, they create a powerful presence. Others feel curious about them. They want to know their story. They want to understand their perspective, and that curiosity creates connection. Mystery is not about deception. It is about allowing curiosity to grow naturally. It is about revealing yourself gradually instead of all at once. And it is about understanding that the human mind becomes fascinated by what it cannot fully explain. Scarcity captures attention. Emotion creates memory. But mystery keeps curiosity alive. And when curiosity remains active, fascination continues to grow.
The ultimate principle: self-mastery and personal power. Throughout this entire discussion, we have explored several psychological forces that influence fascination and attraction. We examined scarcity and why people value what is not always available. We explored emotional triggers and how the brain remembers experiences that create strong feelings. We talked about mystery and why curiosity grows when someone cannot be easily understood. But there is a deeper principle beneath all of these ideas, a principle that determines whether these qualities appear natural or artificial. That principle is self-mastery. Because the truth is simple. The most captivating individuals in the world are not trying to make people obsessed with them. They are focused on building themselves. And this inner focus naturally creates a powerful form of magnetism. Observers of human nature, including the political philosopher Machiavelli, understood that true influence begins with control over oneself, not control over others, but control over emotions, actions, and direction. The foundation of real power. Many people believe attraction is about techniques. They think it is about learning certain tricks or behaviors that will make others interested. But techniques without character rarely create lasting influence. Real magnetism comes from internal strength. When someone is confident in their purpose, calm under pressure, and disciplined in their actions, they radiate a different type of presence. People can feel it. It is not loud, it is not forced, but it is powerful. Because individuals who possess self-control demonstrate something rare in the modern world. They demonstrate stability, and stability creates trust. The energy of purpose. One of the most attractive qualities any person can possess is purpose. Purpose gives direction to life. It shapes decisions. It fuels discipline. When someone is deeply focused on building their future, they naturally become more interesting. Not because they are trying to impress others, but because they are moving towards something meaningful. Think about the people who inspire others the most. They usually have clear goals. They are building something, learning something, creating something. Their energy is directed forward, and that forward movement creates excitement. People are drawn to individuals who appear to be going somewhere in life. Why desperation repels? One of the fastest ways to destroy attraction is desperation. When someone appears overly dependent on another person's attention or approval, it creates pressure, and pressure often pushes people away. Desperation communicates something unintentionally. It communicates that a person does not feel complete on their own. But the most compelling individuals are comfortable with themselves. They enjoy connection, but they do not depend on it to feel valuable. This independence creates emotional freedom, and emotional freedom is incredibly attractive because it shows that someone chooses to be present, not because they need validation, but because they genuinely want connection. The discipline of emotional control. Self-mastery also includes emotional control. This does not mean suppressing emotions. It means understanding them. It means responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. When someone remains calm during stressful situations, others notice. When someone maintains composure when others lose control, it creates respect. Emotional stability signals maturity, and maturity builds trust. This is why leaders, thinkers, and influential figures throughout history have often emphasized the importance of mastering one's emotions. Because a person who controls their emotions controls their decisions, and a person who controls their decisions controls their direction in life. Building real value. Ultimately, fascination cannot survive without genuine value. Mystery may spark curiosity, scarcity may capture attention, emotion may create connection, but lasting influence comes from substance. Substance means developing yourself continuously, learning new skills, expanding your knowledge, improving your mindset. When someone is constantly evolving, they naturally become more interesting, not because they are trying to impress others, but because they are moving towards something meaningful. People admire individuals who invest in their development, because growth signals ambition, and ambition signals potential. Becoming the prize. A powerful shift occurs when someone stops trying to impress others and instead focuses on improving themselves. They begin seeing themselves as the standard they must live up to. Their energy moves away from seeking approval and towards building excellence. This mindset creates confidence, not arrogance, but quiet confidence. Because when someone knows they are growing and improving every day, they do not need constant validation. Their progress becomes their proof, and that quiet confidence naturally draws people towards them. The psychology of respect. Attraction often begins with curiosity, but long-term fascination requires respect. Respect is earned through character, through consistency, through integrity. When someone lives according to clear values, people begin to trust them. When someone follows through on their words, people begin to admire them. And admiration is one of the strongest foundations of attraction, because admiration transforms simple interest into deeper emotional connection.
People do not become obsessed with those they simply like. They become fascinated with those they respect. The paradox of influence. There is an interesting paradox about human attraction. The more someone chases attention, the less they often receive. But the more someone focuses on their own growth and purpose, the more attention they attract naturally. This happens because people admire independence. They admire discipline. They admire people who are building something meaningful. These qualities create an aura of capability, and capability inspires curiosity. When others see someone progressing in life, they want to understand them. They want to learn from them. They want to be around their energy. Becoming unforgettable. The individuals who leave the deepest impression on others often share similar characteristics. They are purposeful, they are emotionally balanced, they are curious about life, and they are constantly evolving. They do not rely on tricks or manipulation. Instead, they develop themselves into people whose presence naturally stands out. Their conversations have depth, their ideas have substance, their actions demonstrate discipline, and these qualities create something powerful. Authentic magnetism. Magnetism that comes not from strategy alone, but from genuine personal development. Understanding human psychology can be incredibly useful. It helps us recognize patterns in attraction, influence, and behavior. But the most important lesson is this: the strongest magnetism always begins within. When someone builds their character, sharpens their mind, and pursues meaningful goals, they naturally become more compelling. Not because they are trying to control others, but because they are mastering themselves. And self-mastery is one of the rarest qualities in the world. Centuries ago, thinkers like Machiavelli studied power and influence in politics and society. But even beyond strategy and philosophy, the deeper truth remains timeless. People are drawn to strength. They are drawn to confidence. They are drawn to individuals who understand themselves and walk through life with purpose. If you found this perspective interesting, remember that true influence does not come from manipulating people. It comes from understanding human nature and becoming the strongest version of yourself. Because when you build yourself into someone remarkable, fascination follows naturally. This is Truth 001, where we explore the deeper truths about psychology, power, and human behavior. And if you want more insights like this, make sure you subscribe and join the journey of understanding the hidden patterns that shape our world. Because the more you understand people, the more powerful your presence becomes.